My name is Betsy Bin. I'm the director of the Produce Safety Alliance at Cornell University, and I'm happy to welcome you all to this webinar we're having today that's focused on providing information about New York grown and certified. It's been a lovely experience putting this together with a lot of collaboration from the Institute for Food Safety at Cornell University, Department of Agriculture and Markets, and the Agricultural Environmental Management team. And we're very happy that you all could join us. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to give you an overview of New York Grown and Certified. Then we're going to talk about the components that are involved in New York Grown and Certified, the AEM program, a little bit about that, how growers might navigate it, GAPS training, and farm food safety plan development, because part of New York Grown and Certified is that growers have an audit. So then we're going to talk about audits that are available in New York State and reimbursement monies that are available for them. We're also going to talk about New York Grown and Certified Producers Grant Program that is going to be available. Those have not been awarded yet, but we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about online resources that we've created to help people get more information and navigate how to become New York Grown and Certified. With that, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Jessica Brooks with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, where she's going to go ahead and give us an introduction to Grown and Certified.
Thank you very much, Betsy. So I am Jessica Brooks. I am the program manager for the New York State Grown and Certified program. Hopefully most of you are somewhat familiar with the program, and since its launch a little bit more than a year ago, but I think it's great to have this opportunity to talk a little bit more in detail about what it really is and what it serves to achieve. It's a very much consumer-driven program, and New Yorkers tend to want to know more information about their food and where it comes from, and there was a demand for a seal that said more than just grown in New York. So what this seal serves to do is differentiate New York's agricultural products in the marketplace. And so we're not just saying this was grown in New York, we are saying this was grown in New York, and it has a food safety component and an environmental component as well. And with those different certifications, it serves to provide transparent information for a variety of agricultural products and ever-growing list of commodities, which you will see later on. What we're doing is trying to reward growers and producers for doing what they were already doing with a marketing program. This focuses and rewards safe food handling and environmental stewardship, which in a lot of cases, the farms joining the program already had everything in place. And we're saying thank you, and here is a marketing campaign for you. There was extensive market research. Again, this was very consumer driven. And what that research revealed is that 74% of people said they would actually buy more product with the label. 49% said they would pay more, and 96% of respondents favored food with this label over those that did not. And this was, a test group of regular consumers. And so we felt pretty confident in that, this was meaningful and this meant something to them. So the benefits for participation are a statewide advertisement campaign that we have been, and this has been ongoing from inception, that has been aimed at restaurants, institutional buyers, and retail consumers. The use of the Grown and Certified seal, you gain access to when we receive your application, and we then send out the digital files for you to use the seal as you see fit. We ask that any major packaging changes just get sent by our department for us to take a look at. We very rarely make any changes to that. It's just more so we have a file of what is out there in the marketplace. We also have a Facebook page with almost 118,000 likes, which for a government agency is pretty good. And so if you don't already have liked our site, please go and do so. And that is also a great venue for us to share stories and new members and participants. So be sure, if you ever have any photographs that you feel like tell this story, send them on over and we'd be happy to share them on that site. And then we have a website with a map feature that will allow you to find the grown and certified participants and producers in a certain area or the entire state, which however wide your search goes. So that we update, we try to update that on a weekly basis as we get new participants. But that's a terrific tool. The commodities that we have launched, we started produce and extended that to dairy, produce being, of course, fruits and vegetables. We then extended that to dairy processors and eggs. We have oysters, which is an exciting commodity, and I think really focuses on aquaculture as a sustainable part of our agricultural picture here in New York. And then beef, pork, and chicken have just been added in the last couple weeks, and Christmas trees just in time for the holiday season. Coming soon is maple, honey. This is in no particular order. Other livestock, goats, sheep, bison. You can use your imagination on anything else that people may be raising in New York State that they may want in the marketplace. And then nursery greenhouse products and wood products. An example of that would be firewood. I think that, in terms of other wood products, that list could continue on potentially into fibers and such. And fibers, of course, is something that may be on that list at some point in time as well. So to qualify for the program, obviously, you need to grow or produce in New York State, and then adherence to food safety guidelines. Obviously, depending upon the commodity, that's going to be a different certification or certifying body. For produce, of course, that's GAP. For oysters, the DEC has a time and temp regulation. So it'll be different depending upon what your commodity is. And of course, our food safety folks will talk a little bit more about that. And then follows environmental standards, which in almost every example will be AEM achieving a level tier 2, which will also be discussed further. So again, GAP is a voluntary program that verifies the safe growing, handling, packing, and holding of produce. Of course, our aim with all of this is preventing foodborne illness and really trying to increase the safety of our food chain here in New York. One thing that is important to mention is that GAP is voluntary, as is New York State Grown and Certified. So participating in training workshops, developing a food safety plan, and implementing practices. So agricultural environmental management, you guys are gonna hear a lot more about this, AEM. It's linking farmers with your local conservation districts and identifying existing environmental stewardship and addressing natural resource concerns and enhance farm viability. So to apply, you can go to our website where now it has been updated with all of the different commodity applications, or please email us and we can just email you out the application. You do not have to fill them out online. You can fill them out, mail them in, email them in. It's all up to you. The information we would like back from you is the application, your AEM Tier 2 or better cover letter. In some cases, CAFO will be enough for that. Your GAP certification or other food safety verification, and your trademark licensing agreement. Below is the address where you can mail things into, and then of course the email address. I recognize that this is not legible, but the reason why I included it is so that you can see how simple these applications actually are. There will be check marks of documentation to attach, but other than that, this is the produce application. And really, We just want to know how many acres you're farming, where you are, what your business name is, basically what you're growing. And so it's pretty simple. So our current participation, and this actually is even updated in the last 24 hours, is we do have 75 produce farms representing over 39,000 acres of farmland in New York State. We have 9 dairy processors representing over 1,300 New York dairy farms. Because dairy processors obviously buy from lots of different farms, it's interesting for us to see how many farms are touched by or supported by those 9 dairy processors. So I think even though we don't necessarily certify the individual farms, that's how many dairy farms are receiving an impact from this program. Then we have 5 egg farms. We are up to, oh no, we're still at 8 oyster growers, but we've got another one in the mail. We've got 9 retailers with a total of 679 total retail locations. Those retailers have signed on, and you'll see a list of who they are a little bit later, but they've signed on to do in-store marketing, special flyers, do educational outreach, special events. And then we have 2 Christmas tree farms officially in the program, with 4 more pending, waiting on their AEM cover sheet. The soil and water, you know what I'm saying. But so if you want to check if a farm or processor is already in the program, you can check out our website. A question we often get is, do organic growers need to complete the AEM Tier 2? And yes, they do. We say the applications take 1 to 2 weeks to process, but usually you will hear back from us within 48 hours. And when you hear back from us, we do send you the style guide and the art files of the logos and just a welcome. And then we send out a welcome packet to all new participants with some of our marketing materials so they can see what would be available to them on our fulfillment site. This one, again, is a little tough to read, but I think it's interesting because you may see some familiar farms on this list. These are the participating producers, and this includes produce, dairy, eggs, and oysters. So just to give you a sense, big and small. I mean, these are not all massive farms. A lot of these are very, very small, and they're just looking to expand their market into some local grocery stores that may have started requiring gas. And this was just a great way for them to expand their business. So these are participating retailers and distributors, kind of in order of when they signed on here. Aldi was a pretty recent one, and what I find very interesting about them is they launched their local program about 6 months ago, and they said that New York State Grown and Certified was the first state program they had signed on to participate with because we actually required certification. And so that the seal said more than just grown in that state, and they felt like on a food safety standpoint, that was really important to them. So just a little testimonial that I think is important to share. And then, of course, Baldor, Green Market Co. and Hudson Valley Harvest are distributors, which means that, you know, those businesses touch lots of different restaurants and markets around the state, which I think is great to be able to have those trucks out there on the road, really serving farmers as, you know, a distribution arm. And that's our website. To just give you an example of what is there. And if you click on services there, you will find out a lot more about AEM and GAP. So that's a good link. If you're on there, there's a lot more information to gain. And here is our contact information. These are direct numbers, so you won't have to go through a 20-minute phone system if you want to jot those down. And Teresa Sweeney is our Excelsior Fellow, who is incredibly knowledgeable and will be able to answer questions as well. And that's that.
Thanks, Jessica. That was great. I will now move quickly on to the next presenter, which I believe is Greg Albrecht with the Agricultural and Environmental Management Program. He's the AEM coordinator and nutrient management specialist. So Greg, please go ahead.
Betsy, thank you very much. I also want to acknowledge our AIM outreach coordinator, Judy Luttrell. He's been doing a lot of hard work on this and other things, and will continue to be a good contact for things related to AIM at the state level. Of course, the best contact at the local level is the Soil and Water Conservation District. So I want to talk about ag environmental management kind of at two levels here, since we have a pretty wide-ranging audience on the phone today, a set of participants on the phone today. I'll give some overview of AIM in its entirety and what folks can do with it, as well as some very specific details of how it coordinates and links in with New York State Grown and Certified. Okay, so I think we can all agree that New York State is a pretty neat place. We have a lot of population centers, cities, water resources. Many of them serve those population centers as drinking water sources. We have a lot of people, and lo and behold, we also have a really dynamic, diverse, and productive agriculture and food system. And so back in the late 80s and 90s, it was seen that, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea to have a standard science-based approach to advance environmental management and stewardship on farms across the state? And that was well developed and vetted in places like the New York City watershed and throughout the Finger Lakes in the 90s. And lo and behold, in 2000, it seemed like a good enough idea and was well enough organized with applied research tools and processes that it became part of state law. And you can see the little clip on the right there of the actual area. You can find the AIM law as a component of Ag and Markets law. And in a nutshell, it is statewide, it is truly locally led and voluntary, and helps farmers work with local resource professionals to advance farm viability and environmental stewardship. The state leads for it are the Department of Ag and Markets and the New York State Soil and Water Conservation Committee. And of course, the local leads for it are soil and water conservation districts, often working with partners, and many of whom are on the phone. And you can see it continues to evolve. In 2008, the AIM law was expanded to move beyond just our soil and water conservation wheelhouse to include things related to air and energy and greenhouse gases and adaptation and resiliency to climate change. So at AIM's core are the following elements. First and foremost, it's voluntary, incentive-based, and non-regulatory. It's at the farmer's discretion. It's also locally led and delivered. And the two key parties to start with are, of course, farmers and their soil and water conservation district partners. But key partners are interacting in advancing environmental management on farms across the state, across the other entities listed there as well, with the NRCS, Cooperative Extension, private sector planners and professional engineers working in agriculture, watershed coalitions, and so on. It's a big tent. The prioritized actions of soil and water districts within AIM and others partners are based on strategic plans. There's a rhyme and reason to it that they develop at the county level. It's not a one-size-fits-all for every farm. It is specific to each farm. So the assessments and plans that I'll talk about in a few slides are customized and farm-specific. The information that is co-developed with the farmer and the local resource professional, like from a soil and water district, is strictly confidential, and that's codified in the AIM law that I flashed on the prior slide. So that means that any documents that are generated are housed between the farmer and the soil and water district. And the farmer may, grant access to whoever they want, but they're in control of that information. There is not a linkage between the work that the farmer and the district are doing and, let's say, regulatory entities or others that may have other jurisdictions over that. Probably getting the sense that it's wired to promote teamwork, and it's hooked up with financial resources, both on the technical service side, as well as once there's a plan developed and priorities teed up, some competitive cost share opportunities that I'll talk about later. More background stuff for everybody, and this is sort of AIM imagery at its broadest sense. It kind of transcends agencies or organizations or farms. And it's an umbrella with the goals at the top there of advancing farm viability and environmental stewardship. And it over the years continues to serve a lot of pretty helpful roles. I'll say we're doing some of it right now with partnership and coordination, dovetailing to advanced priorities and policies, like with a fairly holistic New York State grown and certified program that we're talking about. It's certainly based on applied research and extension, and those go hand in hand with many of the folks generating that are on the phone within Cornell and extension. There are, I'm going to zoom in on the highlighted box there in the lower left. There are some very specific planning processes and technical tools that I'll start to drill into with the next slide here. Okay, so one component of the AIM umbrella, if you will, is a 5-tier continuous improvement process, or planning process, we call it. And it starts at the beginning, where a soil and water district would meet with a farmer and go through a very simple couple-page inventory questionnaire that gathers basic farm interests, info of what kind of farm they are, what their future interests are, and the management areas they have on the farm, which are kind of tied to what kind of farm it is. And that leads to a Tier 2 assessment. And that, which I'll get into a little deeper in the next couple slides, is aimed to, using a science-based, consistent approach from farm to farm, identify existing management and high levels of stewardship, identify opportunities for improvement with resource concerns found on the farm, and really tee up and prioritize what would be a very good opportunity for planning management systems to address the resource concerns in Tier 3. The Tier 3 conservation plans are aimed to prioritize things that a farm could implement in Tier 4. And the Tier 3 plans, conservation plans, is farm specific and required if a farm wants to, for instance, go into Tier 4 implementation and apply for cost share funding from state or federal sources. Certainly when a farm does a lot of work, and maybe if the state or federal government's involved with supporting some of that, in implementing conservation practices, it makes a heck of a lot of sense to go out there, see how they're doing, and then also ask the question of, hey, we still have this list of prioritized practices that we planned up in Tier 3. What do you want to work on next? What would make sense for the farm business and the environment? So that's kind of the cycling through Tier 1 through 5. Now, how does this apply to the New York State Grown and Certified program? Well, New York State Grown and Certified was smartly put together in that it relies on 3 time-tested elements: grown in New York, an industry standard for food safety, and AIM for environmental stewardship. So relative to AIM, what is required is what you see on the right there: participation in Tier 2 level or higher. So if a farm has a plan at Tier 3, or has had a plan it's been implementing for years in Tier 4 or so on, or has been operating, for instance, for some of our dairy farms with a concentrated animal feeding operation permit. That's all evidence of high level of tier work and planning and implementation. That's all acceptable as meeting the bar for New York State Grown and Certified. They would fill out the AIM participation verification cover form that's screenshotted on the right there, and submit that along with their New York State Grown and Certified application. That's all that is asked for. We don't want to see the conservation plans or the Tier 2 summary sheets or things like that. Just the verification cover form signed off from the farmer and the district or planner who performed the Tier 2 work with them. To engage in that, if you haven't already, just contact your soil and water conservation district. And with the one realization that soil and water districts are in high demand and doing really good work, so they can be busy depending on when you pop in. So just realize it's like working with any other service provider or contractor. There might be a line in some cases, and that's a good thing because we're doing a lot of work out there across the state on environmental management. Okay, so some specifics about the initial bar for a New York State Grown and Certified, what it means to have a Tier 2 assessment. So based on what management areas are found around the farm or out in its fields, the district will select among this list of AIM tier worksheets. And these are the titles for them, and you can see they're kind of self-explanatory about what area of management around the farm they would focus on. Just a screenshot here of one of them, happens to be on the soil management worksheet. And they have been developed with many partners, with Cornell Cooperative Extension, NRCS, Soil and Water District, other relevant professionals in the area of management to distill it down to essential questions to assess management in that area. And so here's one page of, I think, a 3 or 4 page soil management worksheet that would kind of guide a discussion with the Soil and Water District person and the farmer on, how they're managing things, in this case, for soil conservation. It results in, assessment ratings of what is existing stewardship, in this case, a score of, 1 or 2 on the example we have here. As we move into 3 or 4, that's an indication of an opportunity for improved management, and maybe something that would be a really good thing to take to the next level with a Tier 3 conservation plan. That results in an AIM Tier 2 summary across all of these management areas that are found on a farm. That's the sort of comprehensive nature of the assessment. And it's going to, and again, these documents are held in confidence between the district and the farmer. Like I said a few slides ago, that Tier 2 assessment is the requirement for New York State Grown and Certified, and it certainly paves the way for prioritizing areas to take to the next level and go to a Tier 3 conservation plan with a Soil and Water District or a partner to work on those areas that presented resource concerns and develop best management practices to improve the management there. And of course, that is a prerequisite and the stepping stone toward then implementing those practices, maybe with the help of applying for competitive cost share programs and follow-up and evaluation on down the road. There are some state as well as federal funding programs to help along the way. The top one there, the AIM-based program, is one that's available for Soil and Water District staff to go out and provide these services free of cost to the farmer, except for the time that they'll put into it. That's the cost, the time and interest of the farmer putting into it. But they won't be charged for a Tier 2 assessment. The others, the Ag Point Source Program, Climate Resilient Farming Program, some other more focused toward different sectors of the industry type programs that we have, as well as those from federal partners like the Natural Resources Conservation Service, are all good opportunities, but they tend to have a common thread in that the applications for those cost share monies are based on priority practices that have been planned. So with like a Tier 3 conservation plan. And then they'll go in and they're often competitive programs. So a well-planned practice system that gets applied for is going to compete a lot better for funding and have better chance of being successful than one that maybe wasn't planned and is ineligible, or where they didn't quite make as good a case for it being a priority for that funding program. And last but not least, some key information to get a hold of us. If you have sort of broad statewide questions or anything about this presentation, please feel free to call me or email me or our AIM Outreach Coordinator, Judy Luttrell. And otherwise, if you go to that link there, you'll be able to find contact information for your local Soil and Water Conservation District. And they are our lead contacts for that relevant local information, for instance, a farmer calling in and wanting to engage in AIM. So with that, I will finish up and stop and look forward to the conversation or questions at the end.
Thanks, Greg. That was a really good overview. I learned a lot. I'm going to try and do a quick overview of GAPS training and farm food safety plan development. This is intentionally kept sort of high level because of the time constraints on a webinar, but hopefully it'll give you a good overview of what's available in New York State. Starting first, in talking about good agricultural practices, I think it helps to define what we're talking about. And I guess when I think about good agricultural practices, I think about any procedure activity that reduces microbial risk to fresh fruits and vegetables on the farm or packing house. It also does include chemical and physical risks, but typically the focus is really on those microbial risks that we're talking about, bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Again, when we talk about microorganism of concern in fresh produce, we are talking about three classes. Bacteria, most people have heard of Salmonella, E. coli, making sure that it's not generic E. coli, but pathogenic E. coli. Shigella, Listeria monocytogenes, these are all pretty familiar organisms to people when they think about outbreaks related to produce. Viruses, norovirus and hepatitis A, again, we've had outbreaks with both of these. And lastly, we're talking about parasites. Things like Giardia, Cryptosporidium, my favorite one, which is not on here, Toxoplasma gondii. All of these are parasites associated with fresh produce. So when we talk about how things get contaminated, I love this slide because there are some growers that think, I've been farming for 40 years, I've never made anybody sick, I got this under control. But if you have any of these things on the farm, humans, soil, animals, water, buildings, equipment, tools, then there is a risk out there because all of these things can impact the safety of produce. And I think the real issue we're trying to get at is, how do you make that assessment on the farm? No, microbial risks are not the only one. I mentioned that a little bit early on, and I do want to talk a little bit about chemical and physical risks, which are the next two slides. So when we talk about chemical food safety risks, most of these tend to be focused on things like pesticides, detergents, sanitizers, or any other chemical used on the farm. Since pesticides are already federally regulated, we don't tend to talk about them too much, but they do come up in audits, which is why I wanted to include them here. Keeping chemicals locked and stored away from produce production and packing, using things like food-grade lubricants on packing lines, those kind of things are important. We always want to have our workers trained, and we want them to be using detailed SOPs. That would be standard operating procedures. It's also good to have standard operating procedures that perhaps have pictures and easy ways to follow them so that workers know what they're doing, know what the expectation is, and know how to reduce risks. It's also important to keep those safety data sheets handy so that if there is an emergency, you know what the proper care and considerations are for any chemical. Lastly, with chemicals, it's really important to follow the label. Most chemicals that are used on a farm have very specific methods and protocols for amounts used and how they're used. So really making sure you follow the label is critical to things like pesticide use. When we talk about physical food safety risks, we're talking about things like wood, metal, glass, plastic, other things that can cause choking hazards or can cut you, break your teeth. So the things we typically see in produce operations are things like unscreened or uncovered overhead light bulbs that can burst. I will tell you, when I started this 18 years ago, I saw a lot more than I see nowadays. Most packing houses have converted their light fixtures. It would also include things like bearings and moving parts on packing lines, making sure they're in good condition, paint not flaking off, using the appropriate kind of paints on equipment that is painted, and covering packing materials and containers. When we get to wood, we sometimes see they're broken, they break off slivers, plastic containers that have cracked, making sure that those are removed so that the chunks are not getting into the produce packing line. When we talk about produce safety challenges related to produce, really it's looking at things, produce is eaten raw, right? So it's not cooked. There's not a kill step. The microbial contamination we see is extremely difficult to remove once it's present. If you look at those three pictures that are there, they're there for a purpose. Strawberries oftentimes are field packed. They're not washed before they go to the consumer. You look at things like cantaloupe with that netted outside. They've done studies where they've inoculated it and then tried to get it off in the dump tank, and those netted areas make hydrophobic regions where water and sanitizers can't get to. And then, of course, something like a romaine head that sits upright in the field where things can drop into it. They're cut, harvested, packed right in the field. So it's tough. If you get contamination, it's very tough to remove. I think the other thing is the contamination is often sporadic. And so it doesn't happen uniformly across the field. That's definitely a challenge. The other thing is some of the microorganisms, such as bacteria, can actually multiply on a produce surface or in these fruit wounds where they have access to moisture, a food source, and the right temperature. So those are all food safety challenges we have to contend with in produce. Here's the areas that we talk about typically when we talk about gaps: worker training, water. That includes water used in the field as well as water used in your post-harvest and harvest practices. Manure and compost, wildlife control, sanitation. I would add cleaning there, cleaning and sanitation, transportation, traceability, record keeping. Again, in keeping to the time frame of this call, I'm not going to cover all of these, but I did want to go over worker training as an example of what we're talking about. So whenever we talk about any of these areas, again, I'm using worker as the example, you really want to make an assessment of the risks that are going on. And with workers, humans carry human pathogens. So we're more likely to spread things like Shigella, hepatitis A, norovirus. Because so much produce is packed by hand, there's the risk of transferring things from the hands. And a lot of pathogens are spread through the fecal-oral route. And, you know, that is as bad as it sounds. It's something from somebody's butt going in somebody else's mouth. But it results from people not properly washing their hands after going to the bathroom or not following proper sanitation practices while they're at work. This could also include, you know, not covering cuts when you cut yourself at work and that transfer of bodily fluids to produce. So these are some of the routes of contamination that we just talked about: poop, illness, injury, clothing. If you have growers that have animals on the farm, making sure we don't transfer stuff from our animal operations into our produce operations. Something as simple as footwear, moving between a barn and a field operation, and then of course your hands. One way to reduce risks associated with people is training. Right? Making sure that workers are trained. They are the foundation of your food safety plan. They're on the front lines out there picking, packing in the packing house. Your training should include things like health and hygiene policies, illness reporting, how to properly wash your hands, when to wash your hands, after you eat, smoke, take a break. Anytime your hands are in contact with your mouth or your bum after using the bathroom, those are times you need to wash your hands. What's the company policy? That's a really important thing, to have a policy that everyone on the farm knows they need to follow. How do you deal with cuts, things like first aid procedures? And more related to audits, do you have a clothing and jewelry policy? Some farms don't, but there is new requirements in the regulatory language as well as some audits that have expectations for making sure clothing and jewelry do not represent a risk. Things that you need to provide, that growers need to provide to get the job done, first and foremost, I would say, is a commitment to food safety. On farms where a grower is committed to getting it done, it tends to get done. If they pawn it off on somebody else and they're not really committed, that's where you tend to see trouble. It means providing toilets and toilet paper, soap, water, paper towels, garbage cans, first aid kits. But it also means monitoring these practices to make sure they're done, monitoring the toilet facilities to make sure there is soap, water, and paper towels, to make sure the toilet paper gets restocked, and encouraging compliance. This could be done either with a carrot, by encouraging people when you see them doing a good job, telling them that you value that, or also with the stick. You know, if you see workers that aren't doing what they're supposed to do, sending them home. That's a big stick to make people lose a day's pay for not following the company policies. But I've seen it go both ways on farms, and clearly I think positive reinforcement is better, but sometimes growers do have to resort to negative reinforcement. Record keeping is such a critical part of good agricultural practices and food safety practices because of the advent of things like audits. Audits have a huge requirement of record keeping. And to reduce risks, you need to do the practice. So that's the key part, is doing the practice. But when it comes to things like audits, you have to write down certain parts of it. And it also helps the farm realize that practices got done. And if the practices aren't getting done, where is the weakness in the plan? In terms of worker health and hygiene, things that you should document are things like worker training programs. Document who was there, have them sign that they were there, write down what you covered. Monitoring and restocking of toilet facilities to make sure that the resources are there for the workers to use. Illness and injury reporting to make sure when people are injured that any produce that was contaminated is removed from the field, but also to ensure that the cut doesn't become infected and that the worker is protecting themselves. This would also include monitoring first aid kits and making sure they're restocked. I put in a template here, and for everybody on the phone, I want to make sure you realize that there are tons of templates available. So growers that are new to this and are worried about how do I set up my record keeping, I really do want to recommend you look at those templates. All they need to be done is modified. They're available in Word and PDF, so there are a lot of really good resources out there. Here's the rub to all of this. I think all growers can implement good agricultural practices, and implementing good agricultural practices is important for the first and foremost reason that reducing food safety risks is critical to the safety of consumers as well as the economic viability of the farm. When buyers want to know if growers have put practices in place, they usually default to a third-party audit. To have a third-party audit, you need to have a written farm food safety plan. So as I said in the record keeping slide, most important is that the practices get implemented. But having that record keeping is important for meeting market demand. I would say, interestingly, the Food Safety Modernization Act's Produce Safety Rule does not require a written plan. But I still think it's a good idea for farms to keep themselves organized and on target. So I do want to say a little bit next about the Food Safety Modernization Act, since I just mentioned it here. It has several sections. The one that's most likely going to apply to growers is the Produce Safety Rule. They may also be subject to the Preventive Controls Rule for human food or animal food, depending on what they're doing. But it's really focused on prevention of food safety problems through the implementation of practices, and it does cover the entire food system. I'm not going to linger on it here because this is really about talking about grown and certified, but it comes into the topic because one of the ways growers can get information about food safety is taking the Produce Safety Alliance curriculum. It's offered here in New York. One of the benefits of taking a PSA training is that you can also meet one of the requirements if you're subject to the rule. That's 112.22c. that says that growers or a primary from the farm needs to take a standardized food safety training. This is one of them. So in New York, what we've done is we've implemented some training programs that include the Produce Safety Alliance curriculum. And you can see here that it covers all of those areas I talked about early in the presentation that apply to good agricultural practices. So extension programs in New York are either single day or multi-day options. Again, we've incorporated the Produce Safety Alliance training to meet those federal regulatory requirements for training. We also have a farm food safety plan writing workshop so that growers can learn how to write their own farm food safety plan by investing that day in the training. We also have on-farm mock audits that I believe are going to evolve into on-farm readiness reviews, which is a new program that's coming up. So I want to talk about some available training dates that are available in New York. If you want any information about this or want to be added to the listserv to be notified, you can contact Michelle Humiston at mmc15@cornell.edu, and she will put you on the listserv. All PSA trainings are also listed at the producesafetyalliance.cornell.edu website. Here's also the slide for the Produce Safety Alliance. There's a lot of trainings going on, as well as other additional information about the Produce Safety Rule, helpful information to help growers understand what's in there. Again, we're expecting guidance by the beginning of the year, and that will really help us understand more about the compliance part, but it will also help you identify trainers. The Institute for Food Safety at Cornell University is a new venture where we're going to house a lot of this information about New York Grown and Certified. Really, it's about being a leader in research and training related to outreach in food safety. It covers from farm to fork, not just produce. And Beth Demings, who's helped us organize this, is going to show you some website access we have related to New York Grown and Certified at the end of the presentation. So with that, here's some websites related to the Institute for Food Safety, the Produce Safety Alliance, and the National GAPS program, as well as my contact information and direct line. I'm inclined to move on to our next presentation, which is USDA GAPS audit and reimbursement monies that are available through the state of New York. I believe George is going to give us this presentation, so I'll turn it over to George.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to speak briefly on the audit itself. So Betsy did kind of opened everybody up to exactly the sort of things that we're looking at when we're going to be on the farm. So I'm going to kind of go into that a little more detail, looking to cover a couple of points as far as what the GAPS audit is, why to get a GAPS audit, and what we're going to need to be ready for that audit, what would the auditor do when they're on site and after, and what happens after the audit as far as the establishment is concerned, and then ultimately the cost of the audit and any cost sharing. So what is the GAPS audit? Well, first off, GAPS, as Betsy had mentioned, are good agricultural practices. These are practices that an establishment has in place to minimize the possibility of contamination to the product that they're producing. The audit itself is going to be the tool that we use as auditors to assess the efforts in place by an establishment to help guide them in their routes for minimizing the possibility of contamination to the product. These efforts can come in the form of policies or procedures, and these can be either documented or written or given through verbal instruction during personnel training. Some examples of these would be policies on what happens if bodily fluids contact products. We would want to see what the company is actually going to do with that product or any surfaces that, that bodily fluids may have come in contact with. And then to follow up with that, the procedures, how the company is going to deal with that, that contamination issue. What's going to happen with the product itself, what's going to happen with the surface that was contacted by the bodily fluids, what measures are in place as far as to clean that up and to dispose of the product. Our farm products unit here within the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets offers two different food safety GAPS audits. These are the USDA GAP and GIF, Good Agricultural Practices and Good Handling Practices audit, as well as the Produce Harmonized GAPS audit. These are used by us to audit fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts. I will say that there are many other third-party audit firms that can provide GAP audits as well, but I will be speaking only on the USDA GAP and GIP and harmonized audits. So why should we get an audit? Well, this is one of the key components to the New York Grown and Certified program. There's other programs that are driving the audits as well. They could be government procurement or school lunch programs. But the majority of the audits that we're performing out there are being driven by buyers or chains that are requiring the suppliers to go through a good agricultural practices audit. It's important to note that the audits that we perform are not regulatory or required. They are all voluntary, and that's been pointed out in a couple of the presentations here today. So just to kind of rehash on that. So what do I need to be ready? Well, as Betsy said, commitment, and the commitment that we're looking for is going to be in the form of the food safety plan, as well as a person that's put in charge of the food safety program and overseeing it. Other items that we're going to be looking for would be water tests for any of the water that's used in the areas that's being covered by the audit. This could be drinking water, hand wash water, water that's used to wash the product, either on a packing line or possibly on a field pack line. It could be water that's used to wash any surfaces that the product comes in contact with. So depending on the type of the audit and what scopes of the audit are being requested by the auditee, there's also going to be various risk assessments that we'll be looking for. These can range from previous land history use to pre-harvest assessment, water system risk assessments, animal activity, soil amendments. Any of these areas could be requiring a risk assessment. It's important to keep in mind that we're not only looking to see what risks there are and if they're addressed, we're also looking for the control measures and going further, looking for a monitoring and verification means to see how those risks are being eliminated or minimized. And we're also looking for any corrective actions that might be in place if a risk was noticed and there was possible contamination and how that would be dealt with. Documents and records would need to be kept as well and provided to the auditor. This is kind of a key fundamental of the audit program. We need to see that documentation and verification that the policies and procedures that the establishment has in place are being followed. Part of the documents and records would be a traceability program. The traceability program is going to be a means of tracing that product back one step to possibly the field or to another grower, or one step forward to potentially the packer, a wholesaler, or a market where the product is then distributed to. The mock recall is a test of the traceability program. It's the company's step to be sure that the traceability program that they have in place is effective and that they will be able to follow that product one step forward and one step backward. Ultimately, too, we are looking to see the facility operating under the scopes that they're looking to have covered with their audits. I keep throwing around scopes. Real quickly, the USDA audit has 6 scopes. These include farm review, field harvest and packing, packing house operations, storage and transport, wholesale or terminal warehouse, and preventative food defense. On the other audits that we have available to us, the produce harmonized gaps audit has 2 parts, those being the field operations and harvest and the post-harvest operations. To point out quickly too, the establishment does not need to get all the scopes of the audits performed in order to be certified. It's kind of a choose your own adventure. That being said, though, it does depend upon what the program or the buyer is requesting of them. So again, you make the audit work for yourself. Make sure you're getting exactly what you need. So what should we expect of the auditor? Well, when the auditor comes out to our facility, it's going to start with an opening meeting. These are generally informal meetings. We've had it anywhere from the back of somebody's pickup truck to sitting down in a meeting room. That's not usually the case for us, but while this is going on, we're reiterating why we're there on site. We're going to also discuss with the person in charge the list of items that we'd be looking to review in the lines of documents, records, again, having their food safety plan on hand so that can be reviewed and looked back to. We do ask that the establishment provides us with their food safety plan prior to our arrival so we can get a good feel of the operation, and it also gives us a little foresight of any questions that we may need to ask the auditee to get clarification on. So this clarification can come during the document review, during our opening meeting, or during an interview with the primary contact for the food safety program. After the opening meeting, we're then going to move into our walk around at the facility. During this, we will be looking at interviewing employees. This is to verify that training has taken place, that the employees know what to do in case of possible contamination. Again, it's another verification means that the food safety plan is being followed and policies and procedures are in place and being followed. We're going to be observing any activities that correspond with the scopes audited. Could be the harvest, the packing, transportation. Again, watching those steps take place and verifying that it meets the goals of your food safety plan and the policies that you have set in place. Again, we are escorted typically by the food safety program contact person, so they will be kept informed of any findings that may come up as we're doing our walk around. Once we feel that we have the information that we need to gather during our walk around and during our interview, we would sit down with the person in charge of the food safety program, and we would go through with them any findings that we had come across. And that pretty much completes our on-site work as an auditor. After this, we would go back to our office. We would submit the documentation to USDA. USDA has the final approval of the audit. Once they have the approval sent back to us, we will then forward a copy to the auditee. Typically, this takes a couple of days to a couple of weeks. It really depends on the season and how busy the audits are across the country. Like I said, it does go into USDA. They have a limited number of reviewers for the audits. Once that comes back to us and we move it on to the auditee, it's typically 2 to 3 weeks. Your establishment should be posted to the USDA website, indicating that your audit has passed. So that's the on-site portion. What should happen at your facility after the auditor leaves? Well, obviously, we would still want to maintain all logs, records, and documents that are specified in our food safety plan. And this is because we are going to potentially be back around for unannounced visits. These are simply a verification that the food safety plan is still being followed. You know, we can't be there 365 days a year, so we do want to make those visits back out to verify that everything is in place. During this time, we'll be looking at logs, records, again, possibly interviewing some employees. You know, maybe new employees have been brought on, and this is also going to involve a brief walk around. The certification with your audit is valid for 1 year. At the close of that 1 year, it is the establishment's responsibility to then request another audit. The establishment will be removed from the USDA website once that year is complete, so we do ask that you stay on top of when your year is up. All right, so the money question. Is there assistance in covering the cost of the audit? We are the fee portion of New York Grown and Certified. Our audits and the unannounced audits are billed at an hourly rate. Currently, that is $108 an hour. This does include the travel. There's also a once per year $50 administrative fee that is set by the USDA. I will say, though, there is funding available through the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. This is $1,000 that's available to cover the cost of your audit, unannounced audits, as well as any water tests that are involved with that audit. Again, the water tests do have to be applicable to the scopes that are being audited. One thing to mention too, this is for a past audit. So coming down to the next point, this is available for the first and second time auditees. We've had a couple of questions as far as what to expect as a turnaround for getting that monies back. It does require that all of your paperwork is submitted, excuse me, and with that paperwork is going to be your bill being paid as well. Once we receive everything into our office, the bill is paid, your audit is passed. It typically takes 2 to 3 weeks for that turnaround. Those monies are on a first come, first served basis. And that is until the funds are depleted or until the grant expires, which is coming up on March 2018. So here's a couple of contacts. First being the USDA website. This has an abundance of information between the user guides, standards that we utilize, as well as you can search the list of USDA GAP audited establishments. So to point out that that list only does include the USDA GAP and GIP applicants and not any other third-party applicants, or auditees, sorry. The second being the statewide email. This will go straight into an inbox that's covered through Rochester and Albany. You can throw any questions in there or any information requests or audit requests. And then lastly, our contact phone numbers for our respective offices. Thank you.
Thanks, George. That was great. It's my pleasure to move to the second to the last talk, which is going to be given to us by Sue Santamarina from New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. Sue?
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to explain the Grown and Certified Agricultural Producers Grant Program. The program description is pretty straightforward. This grant is closed, and I'll probably say that again. But the grants were set up to provide on a competitive basis to the eligible applicants who will administer the programs to assist with the people who are going to participate in the grant food safety standards that they need to have in place to participate in the New York State Grown and Certified program. The goal of this overall grant program is to assist the agricultural producers with the capital costs of meeting these food safety standards, as well as to increase participation in the New York State Grown and Certified Marketing Program. The agricultural producers that receive these grant funds will be required to participate in the New York State Grown and Certified Program. The funding that was available for this grant program is $5 million, again, available statewide. The program was set up so that there will be $500,000 awarded to a single entity in each of the 10 Regional Economic Development Council regions. The awardee from each of these entities, their program responsibilities include the day-to-day administration of the program, the marketing activities to ensure the participation of the eligible businesses, farms that are going to participate, accepting and evaluating proposals received from agricultural producers. They are responsible for awarding the grants, contracting with the agricultural producers, ensuring that the eligible agricultural producers are enrolled in the New York State Grown and Certified Program, and lastly, as contract administration. So we've had a lot of information on the Grown and Certified requirements. We just wanted to put this slide in there just to reinforce how the program came about and the goals and objectives of it being administered. The project completion date, the awardees will have 5 years from the date of the execution of their contract to spend all program funds. So next steps. The program administrators of the regional, the 10 regions, is going to be announced at the Regional Economic Development Council Consolidated Funding Application Awards, which will be later this year. Once these are announced, the department will work with the program administrators to develop programs to meet the guidelines and goals and objectives of the grant program. And the last slide has my contact information on it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much.
Wow, Sue, you took to getting us right back on time. Thank you.
Well, that's what happens when you have money that you can't announce.
Right, right. I think the important thing to take away is that it's coming and that people should be aware and keep an eye out for the information when it's announced. So I think that's very, very important. There is a question that says, did Sue say the program was closed? And she did, but I think it's about the who applied. Sue, you want to clarify what you meant by closed?
Yes, I'm sorry. The applicant due date has already passed. So we currently are in the review process, not only within the department, but the Regional Economic Development Councils are putting in scores as well. So it'll be a combined score of
yes.
the
Okay, so to clarify, it's not that the growers have already put in their request. It's that in the distribution to the regions, that part is closed. The regions have requested the grants. Once the grants are given to the regions, then the growers will have that opportunity to apply for the money. Is that correct?
Correct. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, so Sue's talking about the regional people applying for the money, not the growers applying for the grants.
Correct.
Okay, good. They said thanks for the clarification. So I think we're good there. I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to move on to introduce Beth Demings. And Beth is going to tell you about online resources related to the New York Grown and Certified. Beth is the program coordinator for the Institute for Food Safety at Cornell. Beth.
Great. Thank you, Betsy, for that introduction. And like Betsy just said, I'm going to go ahead and provide an overview of the online resources that are available for the New York State Grown and Certified program. So just to start out here, this is just a list of all of the online resources addressing all of the information that's been provided in today's webinar. The list of links really goes in order of all of the topics covered. So we start with the certified.newyork.gov gives you a direct link to the New York State Department of Ag and Markets website on the New York State Grown and Certified program. Then there's a link for the Agricultural Environmental Management program, and then it goes down through GAPS, and then finally lands on our website, which is the Institute for Food Safety. We have information not only on some of the trainings and services that the IFS at CU offers, but it also has information about the New York State Grown and Certified program. On our website, we have a tab that will take you directly to the New York State Grown and Certified program. So if you go to this on our webpage, what you're going to start with is an overview of the New York State Grown and Certified program. And it essentially has all of the information that was presented in the webinar today, giving you an overview of the program. If you look at what I just highlighted, we have this left bar navigation panel that lists all of the subpages. So we have information on AEM, GAPS, and then the funding opportunities that were discussed today. And if you scroll down on this main page, you'll also be able to see additional information. We've posted the applications for some of the commodities that are covered by the program, and we'll be posting the rest when they become available. There's also this other left bar side panel that has related links to the New York State Grown and Certified program, including the food safety audit programs that are eligible that you would need to participate in to become New York State Grown and Certified. So now I'll just go through the other subpages that we have. So this is what we have for the AEM. You'll find a link at the bottom here that will take you directly to the directory for the Soil and Water Conservation District office. It's listed by county, so you'd be able to contact the local person by going to that link. We also have related links that will take you directly to the AEM website. Under our GAPS subpage, we have a summary of what it takes to become GAPS certified. It also includes related links to the New York State Department of Ag and Markets Grown and Certified and GAPS page, as well as to the Produce Safety Alliance with all of their trainings that are listed, and the National GAPS Program website. We're also working on a directory for GAPS educators that we're also going to post on this site, so that is coming soon. And then the final subpage that we have are the funding opportunities that are available. So this goes into information about the Good Agricultural Practices Reimbursement Program. And then also the last talk about the New York State Grown and Certified Producers Grant Program. And once those announcements are made, we'll post that information up about who the grant administrators are for each of the 10 regions. So that information will be available to all of you. So that just quickly goes through the resources that we have on our website. Before I end, I just wanted to thank all of the presenters today, as well as, I guess, just opening the floor then to if there are questions for me about our online resources, or if there are any questions for any of the other speakers.
Okay, here's some questions in the Q&A. Can a farm just apply for the environmental portion of the program? I'm thinking it might benefit hay and forage growers. So I believe that's a question for Jessica.
Currently, we do not have those specific commodities in the program. We are developing standards, but it will most likely be the AEM. For Christmas trees, obviously nobody's, as far as we know, eating their Christmas trees, so we just require the AEM. So we are open to that as a possibility, but we just have to assess it a little bit more carefully.
Okay, does Greg, I think you'll take anybody. You'll take all comers, right? So if a hay or forage grower is interested in interfacing with AEM, that's good?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's open architecture for any type of farm. As a caveat, Jessica showed that we do have New York State Grown and Certified for oysters. That does not have an AIM component. We are pretty terrestrial based so far.
Okay. That's good. I also see another question in here. It says, Jessica, I noticed Wegmans missing from your list of retailers. Any plans for the support Grown and Certified?
We have reached out and we continue our outreach, and you will be able to see a lot more grown and certified labeling in Wegmans stores as more products, especially in the dairy case, put the seal on their products. So you will still be able to find grown and certified in Wegmans. In terms of an in-store marketing campaign, that's a bigger conversation. They do their marketing so far in advance, and we're in talks.
Okay, super. I do want to thank everyone who has worked to make this possible. I think it was a lot of information, and I think we covered a lot of very important pieces of Grown and Certified. The part that Beth covered about the website was just to try and pull all of the information into one website. It does link directly to those programs, so it's not like we converted that information over to our website. But what we were trying to do was make an area where growers could have essentially one-stop shopping. But as she said, she will share that information with you as well, so you have all those direct links. Do any of the panelists have any last words before we wrap this up for the morning?
This is Jessica. I did want to say one thing that wasn't totally clear, and that to be part of the Grown and Certified program, you only have to have one thing that you grow GAP certified. Depending upon what retailer you're selling to, they may require everything be GAP certified, but we just want to make sure somebody's been on the farm and has followed one of the items that you grow through from field to, packing house. But to be in the program, that you only actually have to have one item certified.
Right, and that's interesting because I know some of the audits have gone from commodity specific to sort of farm specific, but that's good to know. There's a question. Is the greenhouse certification going to be for food only, or will it include annuals and perennials?
It will include annuals and perennials.
Okay, with that, I would again thank everyone who presented, and I really do want to thank all of the folks on the line. At one point I looked down and we had, I think 54 people, so that's a pretty good turnout. Thank you for taking your time. We'll be following up and hopefully be able to post this to the website. Oh, wait, we got one other question. Will grant information come through the extension service? Do you mean the grant information about the economic development grants, or are you talking about the information that George talked about in terms of funding for audits? I don't know, Sue, if you can clarify that.
The overall grants will be announced. I'm sure there'll be press releases from the governor's office. The regions that do, the program administrators will be announced.
Okay.
Probably end of December.
Okay. And we'll be sure to put that information up on the IFS website, which is an extension website, and we'll share that information broadly. There's
okay.
Good. Do you have anything else, sorry, to add to that, Sue?
No, thanks.
There's
Kathy,
a question.
if I could jump in for one.
Yep.
Sorry, if I could jump in for 1 second. This is George. Regarding the grant, just to clarify on our end of it too, that's open to all third-party audits. It's not specific to the USDA GAP audit and the harmonized produce GAPs audit. So I did want to clarify on that to kind of roll into the grant question here.
Yeah.
So that is, I know Jessica had mentioned that, or Beth maybe, about other food safety audits that are also qualified for the Grown and Certified program. So if you do have an outside audit performed, definitely send in the paperwork or contact our email group, and we can get that GAP reimbursement packet out to you.
That's a great clarification, George. I appreciate you doing that. All right, we have one other question. How would hydroponics be under greenhouse certification? So I guess the question is, can you do a hydroponic operation, and would it be under the greenhouse certification? I'm not sure if this is a Grown and Certified or a George question. So I'm not sure, Jessica or George, if either of you want to take that.
Well, for the grown and certified perspective, hydroponic vegetables, produce, we currently have under just our produce certification. It's not in the greenhouse nursery certification. That is actually produce.
Okay.
But I don't know how it.
Yeah, produce is produce for us. So if it's a fresh product, we can perform the gap audit. If you get into aquaculture, there's a couple more steps that need to take place. It has to be cleared through USDA before we can come in for the audit. However, if it's just a hydroponic operation, we can come on out and perform your audit as long as you have all the policies, procedures, and documentation in place.
Okay, so what I heard is that Jessica said hydroponics is covered under the produce, not under the greenhouse, and George said they'd be happy to do it. If you have fish, it may take an extra step, but they're happy to do it. So hopefully, Elwood, that answers your question. If not, you can put another one in. Nope, that's good. He's got no fish, and he says thank you. Okay, that puts us right at the 11:30, which is when we had intended to wrap up. Once again, thanks to everyone, both the presenters and the participants. Everybody, have a good day. Talk to you later.